Look who is still standing. Look who is still breathing after the longest psychological warfare campaign in modern history. 7 years. 7 years of silence so strategic, so sharp, so deliberate, that anyone else would have mistaken it for defeat. But you used it like a blade. 7 years of letting them believe they won. Letting them walk away with their chests puffed out. Letting them rewrite the story while you stepped into the shadows. Not to hide, but to rebuild. Not to disappear, but to transform. Not to escape, but to rise in ways they'll never be able to explain. Breathe for a second, feel that. That's the shift. That's the air changing around you. Because the world can sense when someone returns different. They don't know why they feel uneasy when your name comes up. They don't know why the room gets quiet when you walk in. They don't know why hearing about you after 7 years makes something in their chest tighten. But you know exactly why. Because you didn't spend 7 years breaking. You spent 7 years building, and they have no idea what you've become. You let them think they closed the chapter. You let them feel victorious. You let them craft whatever narrative helped them sleep at night. You were the problem. You were unstable. You were lost. Whatever story kept them comfortable, let them have it. Let them hold onto their tiny, fragile version of the truth, while you stepped into silence, and turned that silence into strategy. 7 years, 7 winters, 7 seasons of them, thinking you were stuck exactly where they left you. But the silence they mistook for weakness was actually the training ground for who you are right now. Think about that. 7 years is enough time for someone to forget why they pushed you away. Enough time for them to soften the edges of their story. Enough time for them to convince themselves they escaped something harmful. But what they don't realize, what they can't realize, is that every year you grew. Every year you healed. Every year you sharpened. The gap between who they thought you were and who you've become stretched wider and wider and wider. Until now, when the gap is too vast to deny. And it scares them. Because how do you explain someone returning from silence? Not broken, not bitter, but evolved. How do you explain someone you underestimated now moving with the confidence of someone who sees through every mask, every intention, every false smile? How do you explain someone you thought was fragile, becoming someone who can read a room faster than you can form a thought? You can't. And that is where the story begins to crumble. You know what the wildest part is? They've been thinking about you more than you realize. Not lovingly, not hatefully, but curiously, restlessly, secretly. Because no one forgets someone who left an impact, even if that impact was misunderstood. At first, they brought your name up casually. Hey, have you heard from them? I wonder what they're doing now. But the questions never brought comfort. They brought tension, because every time your name passed someone's lips, the silence afterward said everything they were too afraid to voice. What if you didn't stay small? What if you didn't stay quiet? What if the person they assumed was gone forever was simply preparing? Oh, and the moment that fear begins creeping into their minds, everything changes. Because here's the truth they never expected. You disappeared, yes, but not out of defeat. You disappeared because the version of you they knew wasn't your final form. While they were living loud, you were living deep. While they were repeating cycles, you were breaking them. While they stayed attached to their narratives, you detached from every limitation they placed on you. 7 years gave you something they never had. Space to evolve without interference. Space to rebuild your emotional architecture. Space to learn yourself without anyone else's projection. Space to become untouchable. Read that again. Untouchable. Not unreachable. Not cold. Not distant. Untouchable in the sense that you no longer crack where you used to crack. You no longer break where you used to bend. You no longer react where you used to collapse. Your silence became your shield. Your growth became your crown. Your clarity became your weapon. Not against them, against who you used to be. And that's the part people will never understand. You didn't rise to spite anyone. You rose because that was your only true direction. Your evolution had nothing to do with proving them wrong, and everything to do with proving yourself right. Because somewhere during those 7 years, in the middle of all that quiet, you realized something profound. You weren't trying to escape them. You were trying to meet yourself, and that meeting changed everything. Suddenly, you could see patterns you never noticed before. You could identify manipulation before it formed. You could sense insincerity like a vibration in the air. You could feel when energy didn't align with yours. You could see through facades you once fell for. Your intuition sharpened into something almost surgical. You didn't just grow, you upgraded. And now that you've returned, calm, steady, unreadable, they feel it. They feel the shift in your presence. They feel the old dynamic cracking under the pressure of your new identity. They feel the unwritten truth lingering in the air. The person they knew is gone, replaced by someone who has walked through deep internal storms and come out sculpted by fire. Someone who's no longer controlled by validation or fear. Someone who carries their own crown, an invisible crown made of resilience, clarity, awareness, intention. Not a crown to rule others, a crown to rule yourself. Because that's the real transformation. Not power over people, but power over who you are becoming. 7 years taught you what truly matters. 7 years taught you where to place your energy. 7 years taught you how to detach from chaos and attach to purpose. 7 years taught you not to match people's behavior, but to master your own. You know what else it taught you? Silence is a strategy. Stillness is a weapon. Growth is the ultimate plot twist, and now they are living inside that plot twist. They thought your chapter ended. They didn't realize you were rewriting the entire book. But look at you now, standing in a version of yourself that they never imagined you'd reach. Moving with an energy they can't recognize, not because it's foreign, but because it's evolved. You're not the character they remember. You're the author now. Every step you take carries intention. Every breath carries awareness. Every decision is made from self-recognition, not self-defense. And you haven't even revealed the full transformation yet. They've seen glimpses, hints, shadows, but not the totality of what you've become. Because your evolution is still unfolding. Your story is still expanding. Your rise is still rising. And that's why this isn't the ending of the script. This isn't the climax. This isn't the moment of resolution. This is the shift, the hinge, the inhale before the transformation becomes undeniable. Because you didn't return for closure. You didn't return for recognition. You didn't return to prove your worth. You returned because the world finally caught up to your timing. 7 years shaped you into someone who doesn't need permission. 7 years shaped you into someone who doesn't need validation. 7 years shaped you into someone who doesn't need revenge. What you need, what you claim, is clarity. And clarity is louder than any victory shout. So breathe. Feel this moment. Feel the electricity underneath your skin. Feel the awakening humming through your bones. Because the rise has only begun. And what comes next? That's where the story gets dangerous. In the best, most transformational way possible. But now the pause is over. The air around you is shifting again. Heavier, sharper. almost vibrating with the weight of what comes next. You can feel it in your chest. That slow, controlled burn that doesn't fade like fear, doesn't tremble like doubt. Number, this is different. This is recognition. This is arrival. This is the moment when 7 years of silence start speaking for you. You don't have to announce anything. Your presence does the talking. And that's exactly why they're unsettled. Because the silence that once looked like disappearance now looks like discipline. The quiet that once looked like retreat now looks like strategy. The distance that once looked like loss now look. You think they haven't noticed? Oh, they've noticed. The shift in your voice, steady, grounded. The change in your eyes, clear, unreadable. The weight in your steps, intentional, unhurried. You're not moving like someone returning. You're moving like someone who has already arrived. 7 years ago, they thought you were fragile. But what they didn't understand is that fragility isn't weakness. It's raw potential. They mistook your vulnerability as a flaw when it was actually the blueprint for your evolution. They thought you were breaking while you were actually bending, reshaping, redefining, absorbing everything you needed to become someone they could no longer define. They don't know how to place you now. They don't know where to categorize you. They don't know how to speak about you without their voice betraying the truth. You outgrew every version of you they ever created. And now that you stand differently, live differently, breathe differently, they're being forced to confront the reality they avoided for 7 years. You didn't disappear. You ascended. You didn't retreat. You evolved. You didn't fall behind. You outpaced them. And now they're scrambling to rewrite the story again, trying to make sense of a version of you that doesn't fit the narrative they spent years protecting. But it's too late. The story has already collapsed. The truth has slipped through the cracks. The room they once controlled is filled with your silence now, and your silence is louder than any defense they could ever form. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're not dramatic. You're awake. And awakening is something no one can undo. You want to know the real reason they're uncomfortable. It's not because you returned. It's because you returned without needing anything from them. You didn't come back for validation, apology, acceptance, or closure. You didn't come to reopen old wounds. You came back carrying your own identity, full, whole, unshaken. And that alone is enough to make the ground beneath them shift. Because people who once believed they had power over your story are now realizing they were merely temporary characters in your evolution. Look at how they study you now. Look at how quietly they listen when you speak. Look at how carefully they respond, as if every word matters. And it does. Because the power dynamic has changed. Not because you demanded it. Not because you forced it, but because you became someone who doesn't operate in the same emotional field anymore. You mastered your triggers. You mastered your reactions. You mastered your silence. You mastered yourself. And mastery. Mastery is the ultimate crown. It's not worn on your head. It's worn in your energy, in the steadiness of your breath, in the clarity in your decisions, in the calm way you move through a world that once overwhelmed you. The old you reacted, the new you observes, the old you chased, the new you attracts, the old you needed answers. The new you is the answer. This is why they feel it. This weight, this shift, this unspoken authority radiating from you like heat. It's not arrogance. It's alignment. It's the quiet, undeniable confidence that comes from walking through 7 years of shadows and learning how to see in the dark. You're not here to prove anything. You're here to embody everything. But let's go deeper. because this is where the transformation sharpens into something unforgettable. Inside you, there was always a fire, small, flickering, fragile, kept alive even when everything around you tried to suffocate it. For years, that flame wasn't bright enough to light your path, but it burned anyway. Slowly, quietly, faithfully, and over time, the silence fed it. The solitude shaped it. The pain refined it. Until the flame wasn't a flicker anymore. It became a blaze. That's what they feel now. The heat of someone who finally understands their own power. A power built not on validation, not on approval, not on revenge, but on self-recognition. And here's the truth that will echo long after this moment. You didn't rise to spite anyone. You rose because you were always meant to. 7 years didn't weaken you. 7 years prepared you. They taught you how to breathe in chaos, how to stand in storms, how to recognize your own worth without needing permission. And now that you've stepped into the fullness of who you are, you don't need to fight for your place. You are the place. You are the shift. You are the revelation, and they know it. But here's where the story truly ends. Not with a dramatic confrontation, not with a speech, not with a symbolic victory. It ends with a realization so powerful, it changes everything. You don't need them to understand your journey. You don't need them to validate your evolution. You don't need them to acknowledge your rise. Because this final chapter isn't about them. It's about you, reclaiming the narrative you abandoned 7 years ago. You pick it back up now, not with trembling hands, not with uncertainty, but with the